There was a time when Rolling Acres Mall in Akron, Ohio was the place to be on a Saturday afternoon. 5 anchor stores, a food court packed with teenagers, a fountain kids threw pennies into while their parents browsed Sears. Then something went very wrong. And it went wrong slowly enough that nobody noticed until it was already over. This is the slow death of Rolling Acres Mall, America's largest dead mall. The dream on the southwest side. Rolling Acres didn't just appear, it was planned, debated, studied, and sold to an entire city before a single shovel hit the ground. The story begins in 1964, when developers first started conducting studies on a 260-acre parcel of land along Romig Road on Akron's southwestern side. The land sat between the working-class neighborhoods of southwest Akron and the city of Barberton, in a part of Ohio that had a modest but real population base and, critically, no major enclosed mall of its own. Several other locations were originally considered, including Barberton's Austin Estates, but the Romig Road site eventually won out. Studies showed that several major department stores had expressed genuine interest in that area. That was all the encouragement the developers needed. The project was led by Forest City Enterprises, a Cleveland-based development company that had already built other retail centers in the Akron area, working alongside developer R.B. Buchholzer, who had also developed Chapel Hill Mall in another part of the city. Getting the mall built was not a simple matter. The land had to be annexed from the city of Norton around 1970 before Akron could move forward. The city of Akron had to budget $1.1 million toward highway and sewer improvements along Romig Road just to handle the projected traffic increases. Construction required relocating 2 natural gas lines. The chosen architect was the Kiva Kext Association of Cleveland. By mid-1973, Sears had signed as the first anchor tenant a 151,933 square foot store that would anchor the mall's east end and give the project the credibility it needed to attract other retailers. JCPenney was in the process of completing a 160,000 square foot store. Construction began in earnest, and on August 6, 1975, Rolling Acres Mall opened its doors. The opening wasn't a fully finished product. The mall launched with Sears as its sole anchor store and approximately 21 inline shops. But by the end of 1975, the total had grown to about 50 stores, and the momentum was undeniable. JCPenney opened shortly after. In 1977, a third wing was added, the Court of Aquarius, bringing Montgomery Ward as an anchor tenant, alongside what was briefly described as a small aquarium feature. In 1978 came the Promenade, a 2-story wing with a food court originally called the Prom and Eat, renamed Picnic Place in April 1981, and a 4th anchor, O'Neill's, an Ohio regional department store chain. A 3-screen General Cinema movie theater opened in August 1976. The mall's design had real personality. The central area featured a distinctive architectural centerpiece known as the Court of the 12 Trees, where live trees grew inside a greenhouse-style skylight structure. A bubble elevator moved shoppers between levels. The orange-tiled fountain in the center became a landmark. Natural light flooded the interior through an extensive skylight system that gave the mall a warmth most enclosed malls couldn't match. By the early 1980s, Rolling Acres was not just a mall. It was a civic anchor for the southwest side of Akron, the largest and most modern enclosed shopping center in the area, and a genuine gathering place for a significant part of the city's population. The golden era and what it felt like. There is a particular kind of feeling that people who grew up in the 1980s and early 1990s associate with their local mall. Rolling Acres generated that feeling for an entire generation of Akron area residents. In the 1980s and early 1990s, the Cleveland Plain Dealer would later recall, all of Akron shopped at the Mega Mall. Sandwiched between blue-collar Barberton and southwest Akron, kids flicked pennies into the mall's orange-tiled fountain, spent their allowance on earrings at Claire's, and picked out back-to-school loafers at Tom McCann. The food court drew lunchtime crowds. Gorging on boardwalk fries while wandering the corridors on a Saturday was a rite of passage. The theater showed first-run films. The anchor stores ran seasonal sales that the entire Akron newspaper-reading public knew about. The mall's atmosphere mattered as much as its retail mix. The greenhouse-style skylight structure that covered the Court of the 12 Trees, the central atrium where live trees grew year-round, gave Rolling Acres an openness that felt unlike the more typical enclosed mall experience. On a gray Ohio winter day, walking into that light-filled central court had a particular psychological lift. It felt like someone had figured something out. A 1986 renovation freshened up the interior and coincided with another anchor change. Montgomery Ward departed, and Higbee's took its place. Then in 1989, O'Neill's was absorbed into May Company, Ohio, which later became Kaufman's in 1993. The anchor at that spot went through 4 names in as many years, which should have been a warning signal about the instability of department store chains. But in the late 1980s, nobody was reading that warning yet. The mall hosted family festivals. The Akron Youth Symphony Orchestra performed there. In the mid-1990s, an episode of the PBS children's show Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego was filmed there. A curious detail that somehow perfectly encapsulates the all things to all people ambition of a major regional mall at its height. By October 1994, work began on the mall's final and largest addition, a Target store and a 21,000 square foot connecting passageway. At that moment, Rolling Acres had 140 stores and 98% occupancy, 5 anchor stores, a food court, a movie theater, a genuinely packed retail environment covering 1.3 million square feet of space. Target opened in 1995, and it would turn out to be both the mall's final major addition and the peak of everything that Rolling Acres would ever be. It took exactly 1 year for the deterioration to begin, when the cracks started showing. The late 1990s were when the American mall model started coming apart at the seams for a specific category of properties, and Rolling Acres was perfectly positioned to catch the worst of it. In 1997, the nearby Summit Mall received a major renovation. That single event had an outsized impact on Rolling Acres, drawing away a meaningful portion of the shopper traffic that had previously had nowhere better to go. Summit Mall was newer, cleaner, and post-renovation offered a demonstrably better experience. Retail tenants noticed immediately. Chapel Hill Mall had also received renovations in the 1990s. Rolling Acres, by contrast, had not kept pace with either competitor in terms of physical investment. The same year, Dillard's converted its Rolling Acres location from a full-line store to a clearance outlet, a drastic step that signaled the chain had given up on the location as a genuine shopping destination. JCPenney followed in 1999 with the same conversion, making its Rolling Acres store only the 3rd JCPenney in the country to be downgraded from a conventional store to an outlet. Employees at the time told the Akron Beacon-Journal that the store had experienced declining sales for years before the conversion. Meanwhile, broader retail trends were accelerating the problem. By the mid-1990s, the industry had already begun shifting towards standalone big-box stores and what were being called superstrip malls, open-air power centers with massive stores and easy parking. Target, Best Buy, Walmart, and their competitors were building enormous freestanding locations that offered lower prices and easier access than anything inside an enclosed mall could match. The very retailers that anchor malls were building their way out of needing them. Then came the internet. Online shopping in the late 1990s was still rudimentary, but it was growing. And every dollar that went to a website was a dollar that didn't come through the mall entrance. The neighborhood around Rolling Acres also shifted significantly during this period. As Akron's demographics changed, perceptions of safety around the mall became a factor in shopping decisions. The Akron Beacon-Journal noted explicitly in 2002 that the mall and its surrounding area had faltered since the early 1990s due to perceptions of high crime and lack of renovations compared to competitors. Right or wrong, the reputation calculus had changed, and in retail, perception directly drives traffic. By 2002, Rolling Acres had gone from 98% occupancy to approximately 65% occupancy. Major retailers had departed. KB Toys, Lane Bryant, Victoria's Secret, and Walden Books were all gone. The mall was deteriorating physically as maintenance investments dried up, and the owners, Forest City Enterprises, which had developed the mall, sold it in 2000 to Bankers Trust. Then again the following year to a new owner who purchased the 1.3 million square foot property for $7 million, but almost immediately decided the investment required was more than they were willing to make. The Whichard years, when all hope was lost. In September 2002, a North Carolina businessman named Haywood Whichard and his family purchased Rolling Acres for $2.75 million, a fraction of what it had sold for just a year earlier, and a remarkable discount on a 1.3 million square foot retail property in a metropolitan area of 700,000 people. The Akron Beacon-Journal noted at the time of the purchase that Whichard had a documented track record of buying faltering malls at low prices and making no meaningful attempt to revitalize them, with many of his properties ultimately being demolished or converted to non-retail use. The article noted this explicitly in 2002, when they bought it, which means the community could see exactly what was happening and was powerless to stop it. The Whichard strategy was essentially a holding pattern with a profit motive that never materialized. The family planned to flip the property within a year for a higher price, a strategy they had reportedly used at other properties. Instead, by July 2003, just 10 months after purchase, occupancy had dropped to 50%. The prime national retailers who hadn't already left were leaving now. The mall was in a death spiral of reduced traffic, leading to reduced retailer confidence, leading to further departures, leading to further reduced traffic, the self-reinforcing loop that marks the terminal phase of a dead mall. I was there with my cousins probably every weekend in '88, '89, one former frequent visitor wrote on a Dead Malls forum years later. By the time I went back in like 2003 or 2004 to pick something up from Sears, I walked through the main part of the mall, and the emptiness was just a lot to take in. You could hear your own footsteps. By 2006, the collapse was accelerating dramatically. Target, the last edition, and the 1995 high watermark relocated to Wadsworth, Ohio in February 2006. Dillard's closed its clearance outlet in August 2006. Kaufmann's was acquired by Macy's, and the store was rebranded in September 2006. A new owner, Invest Commercial LLC's Michael Mirharuni, purchased the mall in July 2006 for just $1.6 million, roughly $1 per square foot for a 1.3 million square foot structure with only 40 remaining tenants. Those 40 tenants included Dollar General, Mastercuts, Bath & Body Works, Zales Jewelers, Subway, Hershey's Ice Cream, GNC, and Foot Action. The Rolling Acres Cinema had been opening and closing under various ownership arrangements throughout this period, finally closing for good in mid-2007. Even Macy's, which had replaced Kaufmann's with genuine corporate investment, couldn't make Rolling Acres work. Macy's closed the location in March 2008 due to poor sales, the final full-line anchor store to abandon ship. The day the lights went out, October 31st, 2008, Halloween. The owners of Rolling Acres Mall had failed to pay electric bills to First Energy since 2006. The power company's patience, understandably, had run out. The mall that had opened with celebration and optimism in August 1975 closed its doors. Not with a ceremony, not with a farewell event, not with a news article prepared in advance, or a final sale announced to clear the last of the inventory, but because the electricity bill hadn't been paid in 2 years. 8 remaining tenants were left with little warning time to pack up and relocate. Diamond Men's store moved around the corner and continued operations until 2016. The others scattered. The interior of the mall, the food court, the corridors, the court of the 12 trees, the orange-tiled fountain, the bubble elevator was now sealed off from the public. Only 2 anchors continued operating, and they did so from their exterior entrances, essentially ignoring the dead mall they were still technically attached to. Sears continued operating from its own doors. JCPenney Outlet, the clearance version that had replaced the full-line store a decade earlier, continued similarly. The mall interior became a sealed-off ghost. A 1.3 million square foot building in the middle of a residential neighborhood was simply shut off from the world, its contents left in place, its systems no longer running, its future entirely unresolved. The property changed hands again in November 2010, sold to a California investor for $3 million, who announced plans to convert it into a mixed-use facility. Those plans never advanced beyond the announcement stage. The interior deteriorated as scrappers broke in to remove copper, and other salvageable materials. Kids explored the abandoned spaces, posting photographs and video online that began generating significant attention in the growing dead mall community. Then, in April 2011, Sears announced it would be closing its Rolling Acres location. The store closed on April 3, 2011. The same month, JCPenney announced it would phase out all of its outlet stores. In October 2011, a company called SB Capital Group purchased all 15 JCPenney outlet stores nationwide and rebranded them as JC's 5-Star Outlet, with intentions to continue operating the Rolling Acres location. In September 2013, SB Capital announced it would be closing all 15 of its JC's 5-Star stores. The Rolling Acres location closed on December 30th, 2013. That was it. Every store, every anchor, every tenant, gone. Life and death in the abandoned years. What Rolling Acres became between 2008 and its eventual demolition was something that captured the imagination of photographers, urban explorers, and dead mall enthusiasts in ways that few other abandoned structures have managed. The photographs that circulated online in the early 2000s showed a particular kind of decay, not the sudden, violent destruction of a building that has been damaged, but the slow, patient dissolution of something that had once been entirely ordinary. Shopping carts rusted in corridors. Skylights that had once flooded the interior with natural light now admitted weather, snow, and in summer, humidity that accelerated the deterioration of every surface. The Court of the 12 Trees, where live trees had once grown inside a climate-controlled environment, became a different kind of greenhouse, uncontrolled, overgrown. The trees still alive, but now part of an ecosystem entirely outside any human intent. The bubble elevator stood still. The food court tables and chairs sat in configurations suggesting the last people who sat there simply stood up and walked away without knowing it would be forever. Some signage remained. Some storefronts still had their displays. Broken windows scattered glass across the tile. Collapsed portions of ceiling left debris piled in corridors. One former visitor who documented the interior described finding piles of old magazines in a security office. Mundane personal artifacts left behind when everyone left quickly and didn't look back. The general effect was what the dead mall community started calling a time capsule of the late 1990s retail environment, which is a somewhat generous description of what was also just a very large, very dark, very wet, abandoned building. Two incidents in 2011 added grim dimensions to the Rolling Acres story. In April, a man died after being electrocuted while attempting to steal copper wire from a power box outside the mall. The damage was severe enough that dental records were required for identification. Then in November, the body of a man named Timothy Kern was found in a shallow grave behind the mall, adding a homicide to the building's already heavy history. Meanwhile, specific former anchor buildings found new temporary uses. The former Target building was repurposed as a Storage of America facility from 2009 to 2017. The former Sears building became home to Pinnacle Paper Recycling Company in 2014. These were functional uses, if not dignified ones, for spaces that had once been the anchors of a regional shopping destination. Legal complications tangled the property's fate for years. Premier Ventures LLC, which had purchased the mall in 2010, fought off several foreclosure attempts before ultimately losing the property to the city of Akron in 2016. The city became the landlord of a 1.3 million square foot abandoned structure with deteriorating infrastructure, a history of illegal entry, documented criminal incidents, and zero viable tenants. The numbers behind the fall. To understand what happened to Rolling Acres, it helps to situate it within the broader collapse of American mall culture, because Rolling Acres wasn't just an isolated failure. It was a particularly visible and large-scale example of a structural problem affecting hundreds of American retail properties. At the peak of the enclosed mall era, the United States had approximately 1,500 enclosed shopping malls. By the early 2020s, retail analysts were projecting that only 150 to 200 of those malls would remain viable long-term. That's a mortality rate of roughly 90%, a collapse that happened in slow motion over about 40 years. The causes are interconnected. E-commerce grew from essentially nothing in the mid-1990s to representing more than 15% of all U.S. retail sales by the early 2020s, and the pandemic accelerated that shift dramatically. Department store chains, the anchor tenants that malls depended on to draw traffic, collapsed serially. Montgomery Ward went bankrupt in 2000. Mervyn's closed in 2008. Circuit City went bankrupt in 2008. Linens and Things closed in 2008. Borders filed for bankruptcy in 2011. Sears itself, once the country's largest retailer, filed for bankruptcy in 2018. One by one, the institutions that made enclosed malls possible removed themselves from the equation. When the anchors die, the concept of the anchor-based mall dies with them. The logic of an enclosed mall is predicated on a specific kind of retail gravity. Large anchor stores draw traffic, and that traffic flows through the corridors past smaller tenants who benefit from it. Remove the anchors, and you remove the gravitational field. The small tenants lose their reason to be there. The food court stops making economic sense. The whole system collapses inward. Rolling Acres was also affected by factors specific to Akron. The city's industrial base, rubber manufacturing, which had made Akron the rubber capital of the world, had been in decline since the 1970s as manufacturing moved offshore. Goodyear, Firestone, General Tire, and B.F. Goodrich had all been headquartered in or near Akron. By the time the mall was struggling in the late 1990s, the rubber industry that had sustained the working-class neighborhoods around it was a shadow of what it had been. The population of the broader Akron metropolitan area was not growing in ways that could absorb new retail development. Every new shopping center built elsewhere in the region was competing for the same static or shrinking pool of consumer dollars. And then there was the ownership problem. The successive owners of Rolling Acres after Forest City Enterprises sold in 2000 were not mall operators with long-term investment strategies. They were financial players looking for arbitrage opportunities in distressed real estate. Haywood Whichard's purchase of the mall for $2.75 million in 2002 was a bet that the property could be resold quickly at a profit, not a commitment to operating a regional shopping center for the community it served. When that bet failed, the mall got no investment and continued declining. The demolition and what came after. In 2019, the decision was made to demolish the main mall structure. The work proceeded through 2019, leaving only the former Sears building standing. That structure had found a tenant and didn't need to go. Demolition of a 1.3 million square foot structure is not a quiet operation. The walls that had contained 30 years of Saturday afternoons came down in sections over months. Anyone driving along Romig Road during that period watched a skyline they had known all their lives disappear piece by piece. What remained after demolition was a cleared site in southwestern Akron, a city that had been watching its economic landscape transform for decades and was actively looking for development opportunities to replace what was lost. The cleared Rolling Acres site represented something rare in modern urban development, a large serviced parcel in an established neighborhood with road access and existing utilities available for a new use. The new use came from an unlikely seeming source, Amazon. Plans were announced to develop the former Rolling Acres site as an Amazon fulfillment and distribution facility. Construction began on the site. In November 2020, the Amazon facility opened, bringing jobs to a section of Akron that had been watching jobs leave for 30 years. The transition from regional shopping destination to logistics warehouse is a trajectory that has been repeated at dead mall sites across the country. It reflects the same economic shift that killed the malls. The consumer dollar that used to flow through a mall is now flowing through an e-commerce transaction that touches an Amazon facility instead. Rolling Acres, in a certain grim sense, was converted into the direct instrument of its own destruction. But it also brought employment to a neighborhood that needed it. The people who had once worked at Sears and JCPenney and Kaufmann's and KB Toys, or who had driven past those places on the way to other jobs, were now working at or near an Amazon facility on the same site. The economics of American retail had reorganized around them, and they were finding their place in the new arrangement, even if nobody would have chosen it. What Rolling Acres meant, and still means. The mall nostalgia community, and it is a genuine community with websites, YouTube channels, and a dedicated following that numbers in the millions, has given Rolling Acres a particular status. For the scale of what it was, the duration of its decline, and the drama of its final years, it occupies a prominent position in the catalog of dead American malls. Rolling Acres is, by the numbers, one of the largest dead malls ever documented in the United States. 1.3 million square feet of enclosed retail space, abandoned. The photographs from the abandoned years circulated widely. The Dead Mall YouTube channels, of which there are several with substantial followings, treated Rolling Acres as a major subject. What drove the attention wasn't just the size or the ruined photography aesthetic, though both played a role. It was the specific and recognizable grief of seeing something from a shared collective memory. The Saturday afternoon mall trip, the food court lunch, the anchor store sale, reduced to broken skylights and empty corridors. The people who grew up going to Rolling Acres on weekends, who had their first jobs there, who met their friends there, who have clear, specific memories of what particular stores were in particular corners of the building. Those people number in the hundreds of thousands. The Akron metropolitan area has a population of about 700,000, and Rolling Acres served that population for over 30 years. Essentially, everyone in a certain age range in a certain part of Ohio has a Rolling Acres memory. I was there every weekend all through middle school. One Akron native wrote in a forum thread dedicated to the mall's memory, "We'd take the bus, walk around for hours, buy the cheapest thing we could find just to have something. The mall was just where everything happened. I drove by in 2015 and it already looked like the world had forgotten it existed." The world had, more or less, but the people who remember it hadn't. What Rolling Acres represents beyond its own story is the particular shape of an American promise that was made and then quietly rescinded. The promise was that prosperity would continue to expand, that communities would grow, that retail investment would follow population and employment, and that the institutions built in confident expectation of that growth would stand for generations. Rolling Acres was built to last. It was built with greenhouse skylights and a bubble elevator and live trees in the center court, because whoever built it believed the prosperity that made it possible was permanent. It wasn't. And when the prosperity went, the mall went with it, slowly, ignominiously, and in the end, without ceremony, because the last check to the electric company was never written. Amazon took the land. The trees are gone. The fountain is gone. The pennies kids threw into it are buried somewhere beneath a logistics facility that moves packages to people who will never know that children once stood exactly there and made small wishes. Rolling Acres opened on August 6, 1975. It closed on October 31, 2008. It was 33 years old, and for at least half of those years, it was slowly dying, which is perhaps the most honest summary of the American mall era that any single building could offer. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more fascinating stories. If this story of Rolling Acres resonated with you, whether you remember the mall or just recognize what it represents, hit the like button and subscribe. We cover the stories behind the places that shaped American life, and there are plenty more to tell. New videos every week.